Hello everyone and welcome to Rad Chat, founded by me, Julka-Anderson.
And me, Jo McNamara. So Rad Chat is a forward-thinking global knowledge hub where healthcare professionals can advance their expertise in radiotherapy and oncology. Unlike traditional academic resources, we blend real-world experience, expert insights, best practice, and of course, most importantly, patient perspectives.
We make advanced knowledge engaging and accessible, supporting continuous learning and professional development without compromising patient care or personal time. By providing insights into both technical skills and career development, helping you progress confidently in your field and shape your professional future.
Just to let you know, our episodes may contain sensitive and difficult topics that you may find distressing or triggering.
So this is episode 196, which is part of our leadership series, where we'll be hearing from our guest Shreya Patel-Parekh about women's health and the 51% podcast she hosts. Hi Shreya, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Good, nice to have you on. Thanks for coming on as another fellow podcasting professional.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Just for anyone who's listening and doesn't know who you are, could you just introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Shreya Patel-Parekh and I am the founder of and host of the 51% podcast, and it's also a place where I run events. Well, I will be running events in the new year, all focused on women's health, and a lot more to come.
Have you always wanted to do something like this?
No, actually, it's one of those things where I had no idea what I was actually even doing. I never really sat down and thought, what do I actually want to do? I just followed a path of, I went to university, then I got a job, I got married, I had kids, I did the kind of typical path. And I worked for a corporate for quite a long time. So I come from a very kind of classic corporate background, I guess. And I left that after I had children, and because it was very difficult with flexibility. Back then, there was no flexible work from home. And I just found myself kind of doing, like my brain was just everywhere, and I wasn't excelling in doing things for my children and also in my work environment. So I kind of left and did various different things. I did briefly go back to work. I had another child as well. I'll kind of fast forward a bit, but I read a book called Invisible Women. And when I read that, I was in utter shock. I just could not believe the inequalities with women and so many different areas of women's lives. And it wasn't just health. Obviously, women's bodies aren't researched, so that's related to health. And then also seatbelts weren't designed for us, some of the medical drugs. They're not tested on women. And then I guess it even filters down on, women, and then you've got Asian women, black women. So it filters down even more. So I was really taken aback because, to be honest, my head was stuck in the corporate clouds. And I thought most inequality is in the corporate world. And I just didn't think there would be this kind of equality, not in 2020. I think I read it in 2022 or 3, the book. And I was kind of in between doing a podcast anyway, thinking of doing one, more focused on diversity inclusion at the time. And then I just thought, no, I'm going to do one on women's health and focus on that and kind of small baby steps. And that's how I started, really.
That's amazing, the impact of a book. Like, from an author's perspective, they're, if they listen to this podcast thinking, wow, I've really changed someone's whole career pathway as a consequence of you reading the book.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, I'm, privileged in the sense that, I was allowed to have that time out to do what I'm doing because, typical, again, inequalities. My husband carried on working because he earned much more than I did. So I'm the one that took the step back, but it's actually allowed me to do the things that I want to do, which is what I'm doing now.
I've read the book twice. It is a very thought-provoking book, from offices, the temperature's too cold for female bodies, it's always designed for men. I think I read maybe last week on Instagram, because that's where I get all my news now, but they're only now testing kind of dummies in female body forms for car crashes, airbags, things like that. Obviously, that's coming almost 2026. So it is quite wild to think. And actually, we had someone on, I've forgotten her name, it might have been Mariam. She's a physicist who came on at a conference a couple of years ago when we did live podcasting at UKIO. And she looked at all the radiation data sets that have been used to basically design and look at treatments and if they're safe, etc. But they're all based on like male bodies or male mice. So again, when you're looking at potentially, obviously we don't know if this is completely true, but the side effects that occur for kind of female pelvises or female bodies, it's actually probably why some women struggle with treatment even more and side effects even more, because they've never been tested properly on that type of body.
Yeah, exactly. I've spoken to so many women with lived experiences, mainly lived experiences that women that have gone through cancer, different types of cancer. And, you know, I was actually shocked when they told me that when they went through treatment, the reaction that they got from the treatment, and it was dismissed because with chemotherapy, I think they had the skin discoloration. It was different to a woman with white skin, and they were dismissed, saying it's fine, and just things like that. You know, it's 2026, and you just think, wow. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if I've got that completely right, because you guys are, you know, experts in the cancer area, I guess.
No, it's definitely something that we see, and from a lecturer's perspective, a lot of the education that we do is geared towards white people, white skin, because they're the resources that we have, which is why Naman and I set up the Image Library to try and help combat that, to really kind of display lots of different side effects and reactions that you can visibly see on varying skin tones from immunotherapy, chemotherapy, radiotherapy. Because, yeah, even as a lecturer, however inclusive I want to be around my education, the literature and the resources just aren't there, which is really limiting. I'm really interested, why the title? Where does that come from specifically for your podcast?
Yes. So, well, I'll take you back a bit, actually. Initially, because I wanted to get started and I was spending too long thinking of a name for the podcast, and then someone suggested Empower Her. And I just thought, I don't know, it doesn't really sound right. It's not really sound. And I just thought, you know what, just stop thinking about it and get on with it and do it. And let's just roll with Empower Her. And I went with it for a while. And then I was looking to kind of register the domain and also as a company. And then it was taken literally that week. Someone trademarked the name Empower. And then I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do now? And it was actually a blessing in disguise, to be honest, because the name wasn't really sitting well with me. And anyway, I rebranded, I changed everything to the 51%, because women are thereabouts 51% of the population.
Didn't have ChatGPT then to think up different names for you.
No, there was ChatGPT. This was like a fairly recent thing, but the thing is, I didn't really use it. And funnily enough, it was actually my husband that thought of the name. Because he had just literally registered 40-something%. I don't know why, for something that he was doing. And then he was saying, what about, 50% or 50? And then I had to play with the words a bit, because again, some of the, domains were taken, and yeah.
So tell us a little bit about kind of the guests that you typically have on, and maybe some of the learning that you've received as a result of kind of the education and support that you've had from the people that have come on and talked to you on the podcast.
Yeah, so I have a mixture of experts in the field of women's health, whether that's related to gynecological issues, cancers, heart disease, things like that. So they'll either be doctors or consultants or scientists. And then on the other side, I invite women to share their lived experiences of certain diseases that they're living with or have lived with or have gone through, because I think it's really important that women share those journeys, not just for the sake of the podcast, but it's for other women to learn and maybe have that moment of, my God, that's how I feel, or I can relate to that. Say perhaps it's a South Asian woman or a Black woman talking about her experience. Another woman on the other side can relate to something. And I think that's really important. And of course, for me, because I did a lot of stuff around diversity inclusion, it's really important to share diverse stories and journeys, and also get diverse opinions from experts as well, not just the women with lived experiences. And yeah, I learn a lot. I have had moments of, oh my God, really? I can't believe that. And things that I pick up and learn, and then I think, oh my God, I didn't know that, you know. But then on the flip side, I was talking about this with Naman, that it's hard because, especially with the landscape now with social media, there's a lot of misinformation out there, as we know. And now you've even got experts, and I mean like doctors, talking about something, a study or a clinical trial or whatever that might be, to say that this is what this is now. And then another expert saying, no, that's not true, that's incorrect information. So then you're kind of left with, as a layman or laywoman, well, what is it? Which one's right? Who's right? So it's difficult when I bring on my experts. I think, how do I know they're right? But to be honest, obviously I'm going to challenge and try and dig deep a little bit. But I see now, this is a little bit different, but I came across an astrophysicist, and nothing related to health. Obviously, she's trying to find life in the universe somewhere, right? But she talked about science, and she said, because someone might find some proof of something in terms of the universe, right? And then there'll be someone else that says, no, that isn't true. That is incorrect. This is what it is. And that's the whole point, I guess. We're all trying to, well, not me, I'm not an expert. So I guess people that are the scientists and the researchers and the experts are all trying to, I guess, fix a problem. And I guess it's a case of, getting to the problem in a way that's like, well, that's not true. Well, that's not true. That might not be entirely true. Let's think about this option or this thing, just to get to that cure or whatever it is that they're trying to do, right? So I don't see it as black and white. It's not always black and white. You're incorrect and you're incorrect. If everyone's incorrect, then where do we stand?
You absolutely raised some really interesting points, because as healthcare professionals, we definitely see that in the clinic, because everyone has different views and opinions, and even the evidence base doesn't always necessarily strongly depict X, Y, or Z. And sometimes what we have to go through as healthcare professionals is our anecdotal evidence of things that we know work for our patients. So maybe it isn't evidence-based because there are no studies that exist to actually support what it is that we're saying clinically. And that can be really, really difficult for us as clinicians to really kind of say, we advise this, but there is no evidence for it. And you kind of can't then say, well, we won't give you any evidence, any hints or tips or any advice just because there's no evidence, because actually a bit of it is our own kind of scope of practice. And knowing our patients well, it can sometimes be a really difficult minefield, I'd suggest.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is very difficult, but I feel like there needs to be a bit of a different approach around it, in terms of calling people out. And now, of course, I think it's very different when, say, I am an expert in, I don't know, some kind of gynecological issue, and I'm claiming something, whatever that claim is, and off the back of that claim, I'm selling you something. So that is I find that that's a bit different, and you should really think about, when people are doing that, to really maybe dig a bit deeper to find out what their motives are. But yeah, other than that, I think it's always like, do your research if you can. Really just do your research and just find out a bit more about that person as well.
It's hard. I definitely see it through social media loads more than I ever did before, where you have, I want to call them like influencer health professionals, and they're selling their souls because they have a brand deal. Like, I find it really, really difficult to watch.
Yeah.
I think also, though, we're so well regulated in the UK. Like, I think My wife and I went to America on a holiday a few years ago, and we put the telly on in the hotel room, and it was like drug ad after drug ad. It's like, I just couldn't imagine that here, but I think that kind of breeds some of that misinformation that, well, if it's on the telly or there's that reputable person talking about it, I think I agree with both of you. Like watching some TikToks and stuff, there'd be something that I find interesting, scientific, and then it's a stitch of another clinician just tearing it apart. And you think, but actually the statistics and stuff the first person talked about was correct. So now I'm confused as well. I don't know what I should be doing either.
Yeah.
Everyone is confused. I'm really interested. What got you so interested in it? I know you read the book, but did you have any kind of medical situations that led to you kind of focusing on this area?
Yeah, so look, I do look back and I think there must be some kind of interest there in the first place, like something that stems from something. And when I look back, I know like my mum is the healthiest person I know, as in terms of when I was growing up as a child, there were no fizzy drinks in the house. Sweets and chocolates and things were kind of pretty much non-existent in the house. And it was always healthy meals and home-cooked meals. And don't get me wrong, we came from a very fairly poor background, and it was tough. It was very tough. But at the end of the day, I had a roof over my head and I had food on the table, right? We were renting out a little flat, and I had the basics, but that whole healthy narrative was always there from childhood. And then I think my kind of interest I became quite paranoid in my teens about health and stuff, because my father passed away when I was 17 and he had a massive heart attack and just kind of went. And I became really paranoid about being healthy. Not in my teens, actually, I should say. In my teens, I was kind of doing partying and doing stuff like that. But as I got older, I started becoming quite paranoid, and especially in my late 30s and stuff. In fact, in my head, I was thinking, shit, what if I have a heart attack, heart disease? And then I started digging into what actually happened and why did my dad suddenly pass away, because it wasn't, again, South Asian, it wasn't talked about. It wasn't really talked about. You just kind of got on with it and moved on. And I started reading up about heart disease like a crazy person, really, and just like going into it quite a lot. Yeah, and also the fact my brother, he's not actually my biological brother, he's my first cousin, but I'm the only child and so is he. So we grew up together when we were younger. He's a ENT consultant, so he went through that whole thing. So it's there. So I think, yeah, that's where I've become really interested in the health space, definitely, as well.
In our culture and background, Shreya, women's health is not discussed at all. How have you found that? Obviously, if you talked about kind of the diversity angle that you wanted to look into, how does that work for you with women's health?
Yeah, I mean, it's big, because when I was growing up, it wasn't talked about at all. I didn't know about my, in terms of menstruation, that wasn't talked about. Sex wasn't talked about. The reproductive system, nothing was talked about. So I didn't really, even menopause, perimenopause, menopause, none of it was talked about. I had no idea when I was perimenopausal. I didn't know what was going on. And I knew my mum used to complain of being hot all the time and just certain things, but I didn't know what was going on. I just used to, for God's sake, have to keep the heating off. It's so bloody cold, like that kind of thing. And I the way I've changed it with my family, everyone knows in the house, all my kids, even my 9-year-old son, they know what menopause is. They know about, everyone knows when someone's on their period. I've got 2 teenage girls. So we're all very open and honest about our health, really. And that could be from how we're feeling, mental health, physical health, all of it. If we're feeling low, if we're feeling anxious, whatever, it's kind of all out in the open with our family. And I've started to talk, me and my mum started to talk about it, which is great. So now I'm kind of like, Mum, when did you start? When did you have the menopause, like that one day? What did you go through? And what we talk about things like that now. So yeah.
It's really interesting that you say from a Southeast Asian heritage perspective, because I was raised by my father and there was absolutely no talk of periods, of kind of hormones, absolutely nothing. And actually, even my mum went through the menopause. And I think back now and I think actually I can pinpoint when she struggled emotionally. And that must have been when she was going through the menopause, but not once was it ever mentioned. And it was only, I suppose now that I'm a healthcare professional, I'm really open, probably too open, as anyone listening to this podcast will know. But I talk about absolutely anything and everything, and I'm an open book. And especially with my teenage son, he absolutely knows about perimenopause. And even if it annoys me when he says, are you struggling with your menopausal symptoms today? It can be very annoying, but at least he understands it, or at least claims to understand it. But it is interesting having those conversations retrospectively with your parents going, why didn't you ever talk about that? Like, it's crazy thinking about what I'm going through now and thinking my mum must have gone through that, and yet how isolated she must have been because nobody talked about it. I don't know, it must have been a really scary time, I would say. Is that something that you've kind of heard people saying on the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the women I speak with, especially when they talk about their kind of journey with their cancer, they've experienced so many taboos, and it's been quite, even I'm taken aback by some of the things that people have said. Things like don't go near them, that you might catch their cancer, and karma and bad karma, and they must have done something bad in their past life, and all these narratives come out, and it I mean, I didn't know. I've not heard people say anything. I mean, I've not been through anything like that, so obviously I've not heard people say that. I'm sure they would, though, especially now that I've heard it from people that with these lived experiences. But even growing up, there's taboos around when you're on your period. You're seen as unclean and dirty, and that stuck with me. I don't know the religious aspect or traditional aspect. I don't know whether things are intertwined or taken out of context. But if, as a South Asian woman, if you're menstruating, you shouldn't go to a temple, a place of worship. And that stuck with me. And I think twice, and I try and take that out of my head. And in my head, I get paranoid and think, if I do go in, am I going to be punished? Or is something going to happen? Because it just kind of, these things just stay in the back of your mind. It's like sometimes I feel like I'm like some kind of investigative journalist or something, trying to really find out what's going on and who, where this information comes from. Yeah, it is a bit of, I'm finding more and more, I'm like trying to like investigate people and things.
It is really interesting as a topic area. I suppose from my own personal experience, I had endometriosis and it took 8 years to be diagnosed with endometriosis. And yet, as soon as we struggled to have children, my husband went for one sperm count test and went, oh yeah, you've got an issue as well. And it's just really interesting that it's so much quicker to maybe get a diagnosis from that perspective than someone who had been, in my case, passing out at work for months and months and months and was totally dismissed for many, many times, even in A&E. And I was actually told on numerous occasions it's because I had a really low pain threshold, and that's why I would pass out when I was bleeding, despite the fact that actually I had really severe endometriosis that needed surgery in the end. But yeah, absolutely. I think we see lots of that within society. And I suppose as well, from our perspective as healthcare professionals, seeing the research funding So women's health topics historically receive less funding. They are smaller studies, they have shorter follow-ups, there are fewer replication studies. The list is endless as to kind of some of the specifics around why potentially there's not as much women health studies. What's been your biggest learning from the podcast today?
Gosh, there's so much. I don't even know where to start. I mean, because I've talked to so many women that, even women with endometriosis, PCOS, fertility, IVF, different cancers. I mean, I've learned so much from them. I've been taken aback by what they've been through. And now through them, I now advocate and tell women who are perhaps having seriously painful periods or whatever and say, that's not normal. Go and get that checked. I've learned a lot, but now I guess I want to kind of delve into the crux of, get into like the nitty gritty of the female body and relate everything as much as I can to the female body in terms of, is the female brain different? Is the gut of the female different? Why? How is it different? What happens? How can a woman eat different to a man and to improve their gut? These are the questions, even if there's nothing, these are the questions I want to kind of ask and get to the bottom of.
Shreya, for all the men like me listening, what would you like us to do better to advocate for women's health?
Wow, gosh. I think support is the big one, and just listening. And it's a two-way thing, right? We both go through lots of things, men and women. And I think the dialogue is always and should be a two-way, respectful conversation. To all the men out there, you need to listen more and do better and be a better man. I think you both have to do good and be better. And I think that's really important. But obviously, if you're a male in a healthcare profession, whether you're a patient and you see a woman that's being dismissed, because that's the key narrative I hear, they're dismissed, they're not heard for various reasons, stand up for them. Stand up for them and say, look, I'm sorry, I don't think you're listening to what she's saying. I think you need to listen better and maybe help her or support her in a better way. So really, it's just being that ally. But I think, again, it's a mutual respect with everyone.
So we're nearing the end, and I've got so many questions I want to ask you. But what's one women's health issue that you think isn't talked about enough, even within maybe feminist spaces?
I think I'm going to go back to cardiovascular disease, heart attacks. I think we forget that there's a lot of information and talk about women's cancers, different types of cancer, whether especially breast cancer and ovarian cancer, some of the gynecological cancers, but I don't think heart disease and heart attacks in women are talked about enough. I think from what I know, women can typically present very differently when they're having a heart attack and often are dismissed. And I've even heard of women going into the hospital after having a heart attack, being sent home, and they've actually had a heart attack and that's not even been diagnosed. Right? I mean, obviously, hopefully it would have been a minor heart attack, but I think that's a very important subject that we need to talk about a lot more and push that message out there that, you do need to think about your heart health as well.
For anyone listening thinking, I never even knew that there was a difference between the symptoms from a women's heart attack versus a men's heart attack. And even on the telly, sometimes I want to shout at the TV going, that is very male orientated symptoms that you're describing. But typically men are likely to experience things like a crushing chest pain, left arm pain, sudden collapse, which is obviously what you see in a lot of these adverts. Whereas obviously for women, actually, they often experience things subtler or non-chest symptoms. So some women say, I just feel really off. I haven't felt well for a significant period of time. They have shortness of breath or nausea and vomiting. Extreme fatigue is heavily related as well to female cardiac arrest and dizziness and fainting. And the one that I always remember is the jaw pain. So jaw and shoulder neck pain, that can also be really associated with women's heart attacks. So yeah, very different between the two sexes. So good that you've kind of raised that, really. And obviously with your family history, I can absolutely understand why you would come back to that as a kind of like a full circle, really.
Shreya, we've come to the end of the podcast. We always like to end with top tips. You've given some amazing kind of hints and things throughout. Is there anything else you have for our listeners, please?
I think I would just say, to the person that's having a health issue, really take time, even if it's, a minute, 5 minutes, to examine your body, your whole body, from the top of your head down to the bottom of your toes, and look in the mirror. It doesn't have to be an extra thing you do every month. Build it into some habits that you do automatically, like brushing your teeth or being in the shower. Check your breasts when you're in the shower. When you come out of the shower, you typically you shouldn't really have it. You probably don't have any clothes on. So do a full body scan and check everything, even your vaginal area, and write anything down that's not normal, that's not your normal, and take that to your GP and really advocate for yourself. If you don't feel comfortable and you're not heard, be persistent. And the other thing I actually discovered the other day, a few weeks ago, I actually made a complaint not a complaint. I had a meeting with the practice manager at the GP surgery because I wanted to just address a few concerns, and they actually relayed. We had a really nice conversation. It wasn't like an accusing conversation. You are like that. It was just a nice conversation saying, look, I think you need to do better with this, this, and this. It would be helpful. And they've, actually relayed all that on to the reception staff and the GPs. So there's that option as well if you really feel like you're not being heard for whatever reason. And then from I guess the perspective of the healthcare professional, whether that's a GP or the consultant, I really appreciate the fact that ultimately the GPs have only got 10 minutes and it's very difficult to diagnose maybe perhaps some complicated things within 10 minutes. So I really think to kind of push it forward, even the students at medical school, right? The students at medical school and the health professionals that are doing the job in the front line, push back on the system, because in my opinion it's the system that's going wrong. And if you really can push back, go and see the head of medicine at your university and see what changes you can make. Write to your MP or write to the government or whatever, or get a petition going. I don't know, there's other ways I guess to do it. So yeah it's very difficult, I appreciate, but you got to make a start somewhere, I guess.
Exactly. And there is a new legislation that came out around second opinions. I think it's Jess's law. So yeah, especially exactly for what you're saying, that you are entitled to a second opinion. It's something Joe and I advocate for a lot, is actually if you aren't happy with your healthcare professional or something that isn't quite right for you, you have every right to speak up and challenge people. And actually we need to be challenged. We need to earn our money sometimes, I think. And yeah, obviously trying to find the right information, exactly like you said. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Shreya.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great to have you on, and hopefully people will check out your podcast as well, 51%.
Yeah, thank you. Check it out, the 51%.
Thanks everyone for listening to Rad Chat with me, Julka-Anderson and Jo McNamara. So our next guest to feature will be Carly Musa as part of our Living With and Beyond Cancer series, talking about her experience of breast cancer, BRCA and Plexus Bloom 43 device. Thanks all for listening and take care. You can use this episode as part of our free continual professional development accredited content, which offers flexible learning that fits your busy schedule. Just check out the show notes for the reflective questions, links to literature and resources, and a link to complete the form to receive your accredited certificate.
Stay up to date with the latest radiotherapy and oncology advancements by liking and following us on social media channels and hitting subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Join a supportive community designed by professionals who understand the unique challenges of radiotherapy and oncology Check out our website www.radchat.co.uk. Together, we're actively working to improve our profession and make a lasting positive impact on cancer care.
It goes without saying that we can't achieve this alone. It takes all of us working together to create real change. That's why we value every voice and every contribution. We ask that you listen and learn, spread the word, share your story, and if you need to, contact us.
If you like what we're doing, buy us a coffee, keep us caffeinated, go to our website to find out more. Thank you all for listening and take care.